सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। हरि ओम। Question. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 4.5.13 says Ayamatma Krishna Prajnana Ghana Eva. But Mandukya Upanishad says Na Prajnana Ghanam Chaturtham Sa Atma. So Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says Atma is Prajnana Ghana. The Mandukya Upanishad says Na Prajnana Ghanam. Don't these conflicting vakyas affect the pramanyam of Shruti Vakyam? Warning Tarka to explain and establish its authenticity. How do we digest this? See, we cannot take two statements out of context and compare them. We have to see in what context the statement was made in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. There, the word Prajnana Ghana is in the sense of consciousness. So, it is mass of consciousness, which means consciousness. In the Mandukya Upanishad, Prajnanam is used in the sense of the cognition. So, Prajna is Prajnana Ghana, meaning that all the cognitions, reduced to like a mass. In the waking and dream stage, there is the Vishesha Jnanam, where Jnanam or the knowledge is qualified by name and form, Ghata Jnanam, Pata Jnanam, that's a Visheshata. In the deep sleep state, there is Jnanam all right, but Nirvishesha Jnanam, meaning without Visheshata of names and forms. So all the Visheshata, names and forms, as though become dense, and therefore Visheshata or the specifics are not perceptible in deep sleep state. So here Prajnanam is in the sense of cognition. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad Prajnanam is in the sense of consciousness. So Atma is consciousness, Prajnana Ghana. Whereas Prajna is described as Prajnana Ghana, sense where Prajnana means cognition. So therefore the word Prajnana is used in different sense, in different context. And therefore we have to understand each statement in the context in which it is stated, and then compare the meanings, not just compare the words, not compare the sentences. Compare what is conveyed by a given word or a given sentence. So what the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad seeks to convey is Atma is pure consciousness. Nothing but consciousness. Like Saindhava Ghana, like a dense piece of salt which admits of no crevices at all. That's the example. So Prajnana Ghana there means pure consciousness which admits nothing else. That's the nature of Atma or Brahman. So it's no contradiction in meaning because the words are used in different sense. So it is true that tarka or reasoning has to be applied in understanding any statement. In this statement that we are making, since the context is understood, the words are known, and therefore the mind does not require too much reasoning to understand the meaning of these words. But some reasoning always goes on in the mind. When the mind interprets what the speaker says, understand? So when I am saying whatever I am saying, what you understand is the way your mind interprets that. And so between the word and interpretation, there is some reasoning involved. That may be so quick that you may not recognize, because these are all common expressions and therefore the reasoning is already built in. But there is a gap between the word that we hear and the meaning that we make out. Therefore, tarka is always involved. And therefore, the Shruti does not lose pramanya. It is the Shabda Pramanam. Shabda means words and statements. And statements always have to be interpreted based on the intended meaning. The meaning that is intended in making a sentence is what we have to understand. A statement is not to be taken literally, but then tatparya nirnaya. We have to understand the meaning intended by the speaker in making a statement. So tatparya or intended meaning of the statement that you presented from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and here Nantah Pragyam, the tatparya is the same. And yes, that exercise we have to do. If a person gets confused because the person takes merely the literal meaning, then that's not the way to interpret the Shabda Pramana. Every Pramana needs to be understood in its own sense. So Shabda Pramanam means the Shabda or the statement has to be understood to understand the intended meaning. Sometimes intended meaning is simple. Sometimes we call reasoning. Mahavakya says Tattvamasi involves a lot of reasoning. And that has to be applied in order to understand what the Shabda Pramana, what the Shastra says. So it is true that if you simply take the words and expect that different Upanishads should say use the same words, same sentences, then there is nothing in every Upanishad is unique and seeks to convey the same truth in its own way. And thus every Upanishad provides a way of contemplating upon the self. And therefore we have a variety of methods of contemplation depending upon several Upanishads. So it should not be called confusion. That a vakya or statement has to be understood. And understanding sometimes requires tarka, which is quite alright. Now the second question is raised with the commitment to learn the accurate Shruti Pramana Vakya. On the page 8 of 28 in the course handout, in the last line, the Shruti Vakyam is quoted as Sramidam Namani. Namani, correct there, or should we learn it as Namani? Understand it as Namani. In the seventh case of the word Naman. All of this is woven. So the thread is the word, the speech, and Nama is like a rope in which all the forms are all woven. So Namani is the seventh case. Understand it as Rasva-i. The third question, Namaste Swamiji. I would like to know where the following sentences Swamiji quoted today's morning class. I cannot find them in Bhashya nor in the Tika. Wow, good. Prachuryarthatvam mayatah grihitatvat Vishayam upapattim darshayati. Let me see, where are we? Yes. अन्नमय आनंद प्रायः न आनंद एव. Okay. So मयटः स्वरूपार्थत्वाद् आनंदमयत्वम् आनंदत्वम् एव किं न स्यात् इति आशंक्याः न इत्यादिना न सुषुप्तेन निरुपाधिक आनंदत्वं प्राज्ञस्य अभ्युपगतं शक्यं तस्य कारणोपहितत्वात् अन्यथा मुक्तत्वात् अनुत्थानयोगात् तस्मात् आनन्दप्राचुर्यस्य स्वीकर्तुं युक्तम्. So प्राचुर्यार्थत्वं मयटः गृहीतत्वात् विशेषण उपपत्तिं दर्शयति. We just quoted a sentence here. I'm looking where it is. Here it is. In the Anandagiri Tika, in the first line on the page 26. So how come he did not find it here? Let me read it. In the Kailas Ashram book, which I have, Anandagiri Tika, page 25. प्राज्ञस्य आनंद विकारत्व भावे कथम आनंदमयत्व विशेषणमिति आशंक्य. How come the mayat is not interpreted as the vikara? So mayat can be vikara or prachurya. So Upanishad is Anandamaya. So then that means it is vikara of Ananda. How come the word Anandamaya is not interpreted as vikara of Ananda? Why is it interpreted as the predominance of Ananda? Or, so Swarup Sukh Abhyakti Pratibandhaka Dukha Bhavat Prachuryathatvam Mayato Gruhitva Visheshanopattim Darshayati. This Vakya is read in Anandagiri. Prachuryathatvam Mayatah Gruhitatvat Visheshana Upattim Darshayati. So this Vakya is in the Anandagiri Tika. Before that is this word Sarvabhuta Sukha Abhyakti Pratibandhaka Dukha Abhavat. So the Vakya is like this. Sarvabhuta Sukha Abhyakti Dukha Abhyakti Dukha Abhavat प्राचुर्यार्थत्वं मयटः गृहीत्वा विशेषण उपपत्तिं दर्शयति. So these words are somewhat, the sentence is the same, but the order of the words is not written correctly here. But this vakya you will find in the text that I have, the Kailas Ashram edition, verse page 26, the first line of the Anandagiri Tika, or whichever edition you have. It is the Anandagiri Tika which I was reading, which is what you have quoted here. Next one. Deliberation on Ishvara was very interesting and informative. Our request to know the distinction between Ishvara and Brahman. Generally, as you said, we accept Ishvara as creator and ruler of the universe. Will you please explain how Ishvara and Brahman are non-dual existence? Ishvara is Brahman with upadhi of Maya. So when Brahman supposedly assumes the upadhi of Maya, Mayopadikam Brahma is Ishvara. In Maya, all the creation, creatorship, sustainership, dissolvership, all rulership, all of these. So, therefore, the creation, sustenance, dissolution, ruling, all of this is in Maya. Brahman is devoid of all these visheshas or all these attributes. But then when Brahman has the costume of Maya, if Maya is superimposed upon Brahman, then Brahman as though acquires all these attributes and is called Sarveshwara, Sarvajna, Sarvantaryami. They are all description of this Sopadika Brahman, Brahman with Upadhi of Maya. So Sarveshwaratvam, being the ruler of all, Sarvajna, knowing all, Sarvantaryami, the inner controller of all these attributes primarily belong to Maya. But when Chaitanya manifests through Maya, so Chaitanya with Upadhi of Maya or manifesting through Maya is called Ishvara. So when you want to distinguish Brahman and Ishvara, Ishvara is Sopadikam Brahma. Brahman with Upadhi of Maya. Sometimes Saguna Brahman, Savishesh Brahman, Sopadika Brahman. So really there is no difference between Ishvara and Brahma. The difference is similar to an actor putting on the costume of a king. So, Swamiji, what's the difference between the actor and the king? When the actor puts on the costume, then he appears as king. He's not become the king, he appears as king. So the royalty of the king, his ruling, his power, all of this lies in his costume. The actor is not king, but he becomes king on account of that costume. So actor himself is devoid of kingness or beggarness or the ministerness, whatever costume is, costume that makes him appear as a king or a minister or a beggar. And so also the costume of Maya makes Brahman appear as creator, sustainer, dissolver, omniscient, omnipotent, etc. So distinction between Ishvara and Brahman is Ishvara is Brahman with costume of Maya. So just as the king and actor are not different, actor alone appears as king. So also Brahman alone appears as Ishvara. So would you please explain how Ishvara and Brahman are non-dual existence? I do not know what you mean by this question, but Ishvara is not apart from Brahman. Brahman alone manifests as Ishvara. They are one. Brahman with the costume of Maya is Ishvara. So there are no two entities, only one entity. Jivatma communicates with prana, with mananam, becomes consciousness. Will pranayama followed with manana, meditation, help Jivatma communicate with Brahman? So I do not know where this question comes from. The statement quoted by Bhashyakara was Prana Bandhanam hi Somya Manaha. From the Chandogya Upanishad. Hey Somya, O good looking one, Manaha Prana Bandhanam. The manas is that which is tethered to or tied to prana. By manas we understand the Jivatma, consciousness with manas, a subtle body is upadhi. So manas by Lakshanamurti means Jivatma, and prana by Lakshanamurti means pranasya prana, which is Brahman. So Jivatma is tied to Brahman. There is no pranayama here in this statement, or there is no prana also. This statement simply says that prana, meaning Param Brahma or Paramatma, is the essential nature of Jiva. So because of identification with the mind or manas, the consciousness or Brahman itself takes itself to a Jiva. And that's how in the waking and dream state, it struggles to become happy. Goes to deep sleep state, when all these identifications go and all the notions about oneself go, then he as though attains or resolves into Brahman, which is his true nature. Sada sata somya tada sampanna bhavati. And then he becomes one with Sat or existence of Brahman. So Jivatma communicates with prana. So I do not know where this question comes from, but if this is based on what we said in the class today, now this is what we said in the class. Prana bandhanam is somya manah. That mind, that is Jivatma, culminates into prana or Paramatma or Brahma in the deep sleep state. Meaning that in the deep sleep state, there is no separation between Jivatma and Paramatma. There never is a separation. But in the waking and dream states, Jivatma, on account of identification with body, mind, sense complex, thinks that it is separate from Brahman. Identification creates the notion or complex of separatedness, and that notion, born of identification, goes away in the deep sleep state, and therefore that notion goes away, and he remains his true nature, which is Brahman. So this is what was intended by that statement. If what you meant is something different from this, tomorrow you can clarify your question. Then, next question from 2-year students. First of all, I want to express my gratitude to Swamiji for blessing us with the teaching of Mandukya Upanishad. When I see Swamiji on the big screen, it feels that I am sitting just in front of Swamiji. My questions are related to the course. Well, very good. I am very happy that you feel that way. I am very happy also that this is an opportunity to share something with you people, and that you are also enjoying it as much as I am enjoying. It's a great combination, great coincidence. So the question is, can Swamiji please recollect some of the experiences of being a course student which will help us right now? Alright, so this is not to do with the Mandukya Upanishad, but this is to do with the course. My questions are related to the course. Okay. Can Swamiji please recollect some of the experiences of being a course student which might help us right now? Well, what I can remember, recollect from the course which I attended, which was some 40 years ago, is that there was one track mind, and that was that I was a student. Fortunately, I had the greatest guru in terms of Pujya Swamiji. Therefore, every class was enjoyable, and so my attention was on the class. I used to write notes in the class. Later on, if time permitted, then think about that. So, just as you people are doing, whole day is focused upon learning and contemplating. In between, of course, there is dinner and lunch and this and that and whatever. But so this is what I remember, that I was always corrected to Puja Swamiji during the class, and at other times connected to the text that we were studying. In between, of course, there was Sanskrit class and there were meditation, etc. But what I recollect is that throughout I was a student. There are no other experiences I can recall of any importance. So this was the experience. Can Swamiji please guide us on how to take the maximum benefit of the course? That's how you take the maximum benefit. I'm sure you are taking it already, knowing you as I do. But in case for others also, you just remember that this is this is a lifetime opportunity. This will never happen again. Meaning that even if you attend another course, you're not going to be what you are right now. And therefore, this is one time, a lifetime opportunity. And what's the best use of it is to learn as much as you can and assimilate as much as you can. So learning is also to be done in the classroom, and assimilation while thinking, contemplating, meditation. And of course, as I said earlier also, and I know all of you know that Sanskrit is extremely important. So as much as you can learn Sanskrit language, better it is, number one. To understand what Swamiji is teaching you, because all the texts are in Sanskrit, and subsequently for you to share with others also, teach others also, Sanskrit is the most required. So please focus attention on Sanskrit as much as you can learn. I also like the idea of chanting. Learn chanting as accurately as you can, as clearly as you can. So all of these add to our strength. The primary thing is to study the scriptures, but Sanskrit is important, chanting is important, and I know that all of you are also attending the pujas, very important. I think there leaves no time also, and so that's the best way of using the time during the course. Can Swamiji guide us on how to create a balance between Vedanta and Sanskrit? I didn't see that question. That's a good question. Because the Sanskrit, like any other Shastra, even Tarka, Mimamsa, all of these are pretty fascinating also in Sanskrit. It is likely that a person may get fascinated by the Sanskrit language and start enjoying, and then it's likely that one can get distracted. So as I said, Sanskrit is the tool. It is the means and not the end. So that is how I remember that. Between Sanskrit and Vedanta, Vedanta is the end, Sanskrit is the means. Sanskrit should not become the end in itself. If you remember that, I think you will be able to find a balance between Sanskrit and Vedanta. Sometimes I see that to understand the Bhashya might take more time, due to which the time allocated to by heart the Moolam is not there. What should be my priority in this case? This is a very good approach, to by heart the Moolam and understand the Bhashya. But I think it is quite a big thing to swallow. Moolam to by heart is not that easy. Good, please do that. But for by hearting, you have to repeat this again and again. By remembering once, you will not be able to retain it. To retain or to remember, you have to repeat again and again. So you make a choice between how much you want to memorize the Moolam. You cannot simply memorize everything that you are studying. You cannot memorize all the texts, all the verses. You could perhaps, but I don't see myself being able to do that. So Make a choice, choose what part it is that you want to memorize. Because Upanishad Chandogya Upanishad is so large, Panchadashi is such a big text, Viveka Chudamani, how much are you going to memorize? But I know our Swami Paramarthananda used to memorize all kinds of things, he may still be remembering Panchadashi and all sorts of verses. Fine. That it requires a mind of that kind, which can memorize and retain, which is great. But most of us do not have that kind of mind, so see what your capacity is. But understanding Bhashya is important, memorizing is less important. So memorizing should be done in the time available after understanding the text, because later on also you'll get time to memorize. So right now, focus attention on understanding. If that leaves time to you, then make your choices as to what it is that you want to memorize. Should I give more importance to in learning Panini grammar or Sanskrit as a language? Well, I always say that it is the language that is important. Grammar is important. But I think studying Panini grammar is quite a commitment, quite time consuming, and you're most welcome to do that. But if that takes a lot of your time, and sometimes you know Panini grammar, all that, but not quite the language. I've seen people. They can repeat the sutras, but may not be able to understand the application of sutra in the language sometimes. So pay attention to language. And Panini is a tool. To the extent that it helps to understand language, to that extent you study it and memorize it. But memorizing Panini Sutra also is another thing. And there also how much you can memorize. Because you are at an age, we are not children right now. If a child goes to the Gurukulam at the age of 8, then they memorize the whole Panini thing, and Vritti. And then the teacher explains to them. I don't think that you have that kind of, you have perhaps, I don't have that, but anyway. So, in Panini also, memorize important sutras. And pay attention to language to the extent that those sutras help you to understand the language. But language is important. Sutra is an aid to understanding language. Next question, can we call a Jivan Mukta as Ananda Bhuk? Even though he is not having Bhuktritvam. Because in my understanding, Bhuktritvam is also not there for Prajna. Since the mind is resolved, still he is called. So Ananda Bhuk is the Visheshan of the Prajna, which is Anandamaya Kosha. So Anandamaya Kosha means you are an experiencer of Ananda, which is what Prajna is. And you're right, that the wise person does not have even the sense of Bhoktritvam. So he is not Ananda Bhuk, he is Ananda. Ananda Swarupa. So that was the question. That if Atma is Ananda Swarupa, then why is Prajna called Ananda Bhuk? Only because the Swarupa is obstructed by the veil of ignorance. Therefore, Swarupa is not manifest. Therefore, he doesn't know Anandoham. Therefore, he is Ananda Bhuk or Bhokta of Ananda. But for a Jnani, you're right, there is no Bhoktritam, he is Ananda. Doesn't have to enjoy Ananda, he is Ananda itself. Next one here. Could Swami please explain how mind is Deva? Mind is called Deva, number one. It is all sense organs also are called Devatas. Because every sense organ of perception illumines the respective objects. Dyutana Deva. The one who shines or illumines is called Deva. So when organs of perception also illumine the respective objects, just as your faculty of hearing is illuminating the words that you're hearing, in that sense, even the organs of perception are also called Deva. And this Parodeva, mind was called the Supreme Deva, because the mind is behind all sense organs of perception, and mind is internal to sense of perception, sense organs of perception. So Pare Deve Eki Bhavan Bhavati. So mind was called Paradeva, or superior supreme Deva. Deva is because he is shining. It illumines. Particularly in the state of deep sleep, dream, what it is nothing but mind shining as a whole, dream world and dream experiences. So therefore, mind is called Deva, of the nature of illumination. Particularly with reference to dream, because the whole dream world shines and it is mind that is shining as dream. Therefore, mind is called the shining one, the Deva. So maybe Prajna is all knower and ignorant. How do we reconcile? It depends upon how you want to explain that word Prajna. So Prakarshena asamantadnyaha janatiti prajnyaha, as what Bhashyakara says. He knows everything very well. So then Bhashyakara said Bhuta Purva Gatya. Because as a waker he knew everything, the gross world. As a dreamer he knew the subtle world. In that sense, he is all knower. Sorry. As a sleeper, he doesn't have the specific Vishesha Jnanam that he had as a waker and dreamer. But as a sleeper, he has samskaras, understand? All the Visheshata resolves into the general or universal knowledge. So all the Jnanam that was there as a waker and dreamer is there in the sleeper in the form of cause or samskara or impressions. That's the reason why when he wakes up, then the Jnanam comes back. So even though the deep sleeper Prajna does not have manifest knowledge, same knowledge was there in waking and dream, even with Prajna in an unmanifest way or unmanifest state. In that sense, he knows everything. So therefore, he is called all-knower. Ignorant as Prajna, because as Prajna or sleeper, he is covered with blanket of ignorance. At that time, he does not know anything particular. Na kinchit avedisham, I did not know anything. So in that sense, at that time, Prajna can be equated with one who does not know anything, because he is covered with ignorance. In as much as in that causal state of ignorance, all the impressions of the waking and dream are there, from that standpoint, he can be said to be all-knowing also. Could Swamiji please explain how Sushupti's Karana, Jagrati and Swapna are Karana, okay. Sushupti's Karana, the causal state, the gross body, the subtle body, and the causal body. So this is Annamaya is called gross body. The mind, sense organs, that group is called the subtle body. And the ignorance, avidya, kama, karma, that is called the causal body. Why causal body? Because the whole universe is created from the fundamental cause of ignorance, avidya, kama, and karma is the cause of the whole creation, including the gross and subtle body. So gross body is product of karma. Subtle body also is product of karma ultimately. So both gross and subtle bodies are products. Therefore, their effects, their karya. And cause is avidya and kama and karma. All of these are in the seed state or potential state in deep sleep state. Therefore, the deep sleeper, Prajna, is called Karana. So, Karana Karya Bhava is an Upadhi. The upadhi of prajna, which is ignorance, avidya, kama, karma, is the karana. And the upadhi of the waker and dreamer, the gross and subtle bodies, are the karya. So karya karana bhava is basically in the upadhi. Next question, Pranam Swami. Is there chidabhasa of dense consciousness? See, chidabhasa, abhasa means reflection. Chit means consciousness. So if you want to translate the word chidabhasa, it will mean reflected consciousness. Meaning, this is a model of reflection that is accepted as a method for explaining something. So do not take this literally. That consciousness gets reflected in the mind. That's a model. Just as the sun gets reflected in the water in a bucket, let us say. So what happens is that the reflection is influenced by the reflecting medium. The water is dirty, the reflection appears to be dull. Water is moving, the reflection appears to be also moving. Inasmuch as the characteristics of reflection are determined by the reflecting medium, similarly also, even though I am consciousness, I feel limited, I feel restless. So whatever I feel about myself are quite contrary to what my true nature is. How do I explain that? So imagine that the sun feels that it is a reflection. It feels that I am so small, I am different from others, reflections. I am dull, I am restless. So the sun may have that complex if it takes itself a reflection. So similarly, the kind of feeling that we have ourselves, the conclusions, can be very well explained by the model of the reflection, as though the self of the consciousness is reflected in mind. So, what is reflected? Reflected consciousness or chidabhasa. That explains why we feel a sense of limitation. What is limited is the medium of reflection, the mind. And the reflected saying, I am limited, I am restless, etc. etc. So chidabhasa or reflected consciousness is merely a model to explain why we are feeling about ourselves the way we are feeling. So take that part. Do not take this in primary sense. There is consciousness and there is mind and there is reflection. That is not meant. But had the consciousness reflected in the mind, then this is how we would feel. So this is a good this is a good model to explain what we are feeling about ourselves, and that the true nature of reflected consciousness or reflection is the sun. Pratibimba and bimba. Image is the true nature of reflection. Similarly also, consciousness is the true nature of myself. So in that sense, the model, reflection model is very helpful. That's why the concept of chidabhasa. Now, is there chidabhasa of dense consciousness? Consciousness, now dense consciousness, understand in the description of prajna, is only dense cognition. It is state of mind. Otherwise, what consciousness means chaitanyam. So there is no denseness of consciousness. You can call it prajnana ghana, dense consciousness, just to convey the point that there is nothing but consciousness, that's all. And so that consciousness is always dense because it is one without a second. Yes, it gets reflected in the mind as though, and what then we have is chidabhasa. How are dream objects impelled by desire and actions? So you have your own kind of dream. I have my own kind of dream. It is true that dream is the projection of mind. Your dream is projection of your mind. My dream is projection of my mind. But how come my dream is unique to me? Your dream is unique to you. So what determines the actual configuration of a given dream? My vasanas determine my dream. Your vasanas determine your dream. What causes vasana? The karma that I perform result into the vasana or the impression. Every experience leaves impression or vasana. So vasana is the result of the karma and dream is the result of vasana. In that sense, dream is said to be the result of the karma that I performed earlier, which created experiences, which created the impression of vasanas, which are responsible for the particular configuration of dream. And action again is a result of desire. So in waking state, I had desires, so I perform actions. So I had experiences which left impressions, which are called vasanas, and they determine the nature of dream projected by the mind. Is the following correct? Nature of consciousness of prajna is non-dual and that of Ishvara is dual. How? Prajna and Ishvara are not separate. In fact, the fifth mantra talked about Prajna, and the sixth mantra talked about Ishvara. It says, Esha Sarveshvara. This one is Sarveshvara. This Prajna is Sarveshvara. So Prajna and Ishvara are not different. The discussion was, some people such as Nayayikas take Ishvara as different from Prajna. They take Ishvara as a creator and Prajna as Jiva, that this is the duality between Ishvara and Jiva. But Vedanta does not say this is the duality, that Ishvara is not Tatastha, not just the creator, not the maker only, he is the material also. Therefore he pervades the Prajna also. So Prajna is not separate from Ishvara at all. In fact, in true nature, Prajna is Ishvara. That's what the mantras 5 and 6 say. Please elaborate on the following terms: differentiated knowledge, undifferentiated consciousness. This word consciousness that is used in the sense of prajna is generally used as state of mind, understand, or cognition of the mind. So differentiated consciousness. In the waking and dream state, we have specific knowledge of specific objects where consciousness of ghata is called ghata jnanam. Consciousness of pata is called pata jnanam. So the ghata jnanam is different from pata jnanam. So this is called differentiation, where knowledge is differentiated by the object. Ghata differentiates ghata jnanam from pata jnanam. So in waking and dream state, the cognitions that we have, the knowledge that we have is of different objects. It is called Vishesha Jnanam, particular knowledge, or differentiated knowledge. The deep sleep state, all the names and forms resolve into cause, and therefore there is no differentiation at all. So undifferentiated consciousness in the deep sleep state. Here consciousness is nothing but mind or cognition of the mind. So ghata jnanam, pata jnanam is called ghata consciousness. So that is undifferentiated jnanam, devoid of ghatatvam, patatvam in the deep sleep state. In the waking dream, the jnanam is qualified by ghatatvam, patatvam. Deep sleep state, it is not qualified, so unqualified or undifferentiated jnanam. How does prajna have knowledge of future? That's a good question. Because prajna alone will wake up next day and become the waker. So prajna is a causal state and waker is the effect state. And therefore the effect is potentially there in the cause. In that sense, the waker is potentially there in the sleeper. If waker was not potentially there in the sleeper, then the sleeper would not wake up as waker. Just as the pot is potentially there in the lump of clay, then only you can create pot from the clay. So also the waker is the effect. So his potential there in the prajna, and therefore waker himself becomes prajna himself becomes waker. As waker he knows, so therefore prajna is going to become waker and know what's going to come. In that sense we say that he also knows the future. So as waker, the prajna knows future. When a person is under the influence of anesthesia or is in coma, which state is that person in? So it is similar to sushupti. The coma, or that they call it murcha. So murcha, being unconscious, is also similar to the deep sleep state, because there is no sense of individuality there, and the mind is merged. So those states are considered similar. Could Swamiji explain the meaning of this sentence? Duality is vibration of mind. Mind vibrates as subject-object. So that is how the manaspandanam. The universe is projection of mind or vibration of mind. So duality is the creation. In creation there is subject-object duality. The world is the object, I am the subject, I am different, the world is different. So what is world? Subject-object duality. If the whole world is the oscillation of mind or projection of mind, then the duality of the subject-object also is projection of mind. So mind vibrates and takes the form of subject and object. Understand? Dream is a good example to understand this. Because the dream world also is mind, and the dream subject also is mind. And therefore in dream I am talking to my own self, if this was dream. So dream is a good example to understand how the mind projects itself as subject-object. So that's why it is said there the mind enjoys its own glory, that it has transformed itself as the subject and object, bhokta and bhogya. So that's how bhokta also is a state of mind, bhogya also is a state of mind. Could Swami explain how waking world is projection of the total mind? Because our dream is projection of individual mind. So that is called the subjective reality, pratibhajika satta. What we confront in the waking state is objective reality, the vyavaharika satta. So we all know that when we wake up, there is no more dream. Meaning the dream is what we call negated, badhitam, which makes it clear to us that dream was just an appearance. Even though I won $1 million or a lottery in the dream, when I wake up I know that it is not there. So dream is mithya is what we know from our experience. So what is mithya is a projection of mind. Dream is mithya, is projection of my mind. So mind projects what is mithya. Now then when we analyze the waking world, then we realize that this also is mithya. Because here also the subject-object duality is there. And even though the details are different in waking and dream, basically waking also is not substantially different from dream. And therefore the waking world or the objective reality also is mithya. So it's projection. Therefore we say two kinds of creation is there, Jiva Srishti and Ishvara Srishti. So dream, the subjective reality, is Jiva Srishti, creation of my mind, and waking, the objective reality, is Ishvara Srishti, creation of Ishvara, who has total mind. So that way, the dream is the creation of one mind, the waking is creation of the total mind. I hope that is clear to you. Thank you. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.